This is based on some travel demand research Don and I and some other folks in the economics division have been doing here at Volpe for the past 2 or 3 years now. So the focus of this research is on estimating and forecasting vehicle miles traveled and vehicle hours of travel. So the idea that there's some kind of break in the behavior, between the behavior of people and their use of vehicles or demands for travel recently is something that's piqued our interest. When there's a boom in the economy, there's growth in VMT. When there's a recession in the economy, VMT drops as well. So they're tightly correlated. And there's some causality here in terms of economic activity. But this trend changed around the mid-1990s. You can see GDP caught up to VMT and surpassed it. Has continued to grow despite the recession in 2009, and it's come back after that. VMT growth has slowed and it's flattened out. Driving has not come back in the way it has in recent history related to recessions. Let's look and see who's driving less. And essentially almost all men, when you look at them, miles driven by age cohort, all of them have gone down. We're seeing declines in VMT are driving amongst younger women, teenagers and 20 to 34. There's some causes that aren't new. The baby boom cohort. This group began moving out of its peak driving years, which are between your mid-30s and your mid-50s, around 2000. As you move out of that age group, you start to drive less. But there are others that are new. People who are not employed tend to drive less. Recent declines in income, and we've seen pretty strong declines in the last decade, have been largest amongst households where its effect on driving is strongest. So these are households with a median income of $50,000 and less. So gasoline prices are up sharply since 2005. But more pertinent to this is if you look at the price of gasoline relative to the average hourly wage in the private sector, that ratio is close to where it was in the late 1970s. Young household debt burdens, a lot of this is from student loans, they're higher than they were a decade ago, and this is going to make it more difficult for them to make an initial big purchase like a home or a car. And this issue has been exacerbated by recent college graduates having difficulty in finding a quality job. And you can see the declines in driving from the earlier chart almost exactly mirror the job losses among men. Even the employed are driving less than they were almost a decade ago. There are also some popular explanations of transit or walking or maybe bicycling to work. Or walking or maybe bicycling to work instead of taking a car. When you look at the change in use of these modes relative to automobiles, it only accounts for around 1% of the decline in the VMT we've seen. Internet shopping is another one that's often considered to be a driver in terms of slowing down VMT growth. And 80% of those online purchases require adding truck travel for a delivery. And then there's the issue of teleworking for commuting. There hasn't been a big increase in teleworking in terms of the percent of those who are employed between 1970 and 2010. But these are things that could affect driving patterns going forward. One of these is growth in social media, and they can connect with their friends through Skype, through Facebook, or other media forms, and not have to drive. And the final one here is car sharing. It's not clear right now whether this actually raises or lowers VMT. In the sense that there's someone living in the city who wouldn't buy a car and would maybe walk or take transit, but now they have access to a vehicle through a car share facility. They may actually be adding VMT. This leads us to the question, are we going to just see flat VMT going forward, or are we going to see this resume? And I think we do believe we're going to see a bounce in driving once the economy finally recovers. Even if VMT growth does resume, we think its pace is going to continue to remain slow. Over time, VMT growth has been moderating, and we don't think there's any reason why that trend won't continue. And essentially, most future growth we expect would come from population increases as opposed to increases in driving per capita. And there's a few sort of broad implications. This is the Highway Trust Fund. Revenues are unlikely to support historical investment levels. Congestion is unlikely to grow dramatically.
Transit agencies have been cutting service and raising fares during this recession. It would be difficult to accommodate a truly large increase in transit rides. That is one that amounted to a significant share of the decline in automobile use without a major expansion of transit service in most cities. Those who are, say, 55 and above today drive far more than those who were 55 and above a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Social and recreational trips and trips to conduct personal business are the categories that are declining, because shopping trips actually rose, much to our astonishment.